What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program video, and it's a very special Kerbal Space Program video because it's the first one of the decade. So that's got to mean something. Well, I mean, I guess it's not like the first Kerbal video of the decade because I released one on Wednesday, but that was like not an original mission. It was I did a small two-part series where I went to Eve and Gilly last year. And I just re-uploaded like a short music video conglomeration of that mission. There's a nice short summary because I kind of miss making music videos and I wanted to just make one with music that I didn't think would get copyright claimed, but who knows? It is current year on YouTube, so it will probably get taken down at some point. So guys, enjoy it while it lasts. Smash that subscribe button. Okay. So, what are we doing in this video? If you didn't read the title, thumbnail, or just look at what's happening on screen, we are building a surface base to send to Duna as part of the ongoing series Destination Duna. I'm now deciding the name of the series and the fact that this is a series. How many episodes are we now? Probably like 2. I think we're 2 episodes in, like this is the 3rd episode. So I'm now retrospectively making this a series called Destination Duna, instead of continuing Life on Lathe, because I know people want Life on Lathe to come back, but now we've seen how great Eve and Gilly, Juna and Mun, and Mimus and Ike, and I think that's it, Moho possibly, or they're working on Moho, whatever. They've done a lot, Squad are making lots of graphical improvements to many of the planets and moons in Kerbal Space Program, and my goodness, it's not just like a slight resolution bump. It is like a whole new planet. So if I'm going to be doing Life on Lathe again, I may as well wait for a Lathe, revamp. And in the meantime, we can just do something in the spirit of Life on Lathe to kind of appease those of you that kind of want that series to come back on Duna. And I guess I feel like Duna's got a bit more mass appeal than Lathe, because everyone can look at Duna and immediately see what its real life counterpart is, that being Mars. Lathe, is it kind of like one of those moons of Jupiter? Is pretty much the extent of what most people would go. Well, I mean, most people wouldn't even know it has a real life counterpart because it doesn't. Let's face it. Oxygen and water could not exist that far away from the sun. Kind of a weird. Let's just move on from that topic. So my actual kind of methodology of building surface bases hasn't really changed ever since I started making them. I basically start with a central core and then build a varying number of arms coming off the edge of it with stock KSP pieces. This is kind of the only real way I found that I'm able to do. See, like, one of the core parts of any good base, or at least if you want a functioning base, is that big lab module. But the thing is, the actual interior of that lab module is vertical. It's not horizontal. So if you did build it horizontally, when you go for an interior shot, all the Kerbals are just sort of sitting sideways. It doesn't look very good. Same goes for the Hitchhiker storage modules as well, and I guess that Apollo-style command pod cap to the central tower. All of those are designed to sit in a vertical orientation. So to kind of build a base where they work as intended, this is just how you got to do it. It'd be nice if you could like right-click the lab and maybe choose between a horizontal and vertical IVA, but small gripe. That being said, the actual observatory is facing the wrong way. That is supposed to sit horizontally, as are the 4 kind of pieces underneath it, those 4 command modules. That's just meant to be like a pseudo-habitation module. You just got to use your imagination in some places. I mean, surface bases, let's face it, don't serve that much purpose in Kerbal Space Program, aside from being refineries and, I guess, science outposts. But the thing is, if you want it to actually be functional, you would just make a rover, like a big roving base. Static bases really don't hold that much purpose other than just doing it for the fun of it. And let's face it, we've maxed out the tech tree. Everything we do now is basically for the fun of it. So that is what this whole series is. It's a completely pointless series when it comes to actually being a useful addition to a Kerbal Space Program. But it's a fun thing to do. I always like kind of just colonizing a planet, so if you guys haven't seen the previous episodes of this now series, we built a space station around the Mun to kind of mirror the deep space gateway that was kind of planned in the whole... It's basically a soft recreation of the Lockheed Martian program. I feel like I should have addressed that earlier. But Lockheed Martian was deep space gateway around the moon, and then Mars base camp around Mars, which is a space station around Mars, and then have sort of Mars landers to go to and from the surface back to the base camp. I'm to say I'm doing a soft recreation because so far we've done the Mun station, but it's much more extravagant. It's extravagant. It's got giant artificial gravity rings, 2 of them, and it just looks very sci-fi and cool. And the actual Duna base camp, again, it's got a big rotating ring. It's just a lot bigger than the Lockheed Martian planned space station, but it is a lot more reminiscent of the Lockheed Martian plan compared to the Mun station versus Deep Space Gateway. To my knowledge, the Lockheed Martian program never really outlined a significant Mars base. Like, there might have been a small outpost, but nothing to the scale of this. Because, again, I'm kind of using Lockheed Martian as a platform to then take some liberties and my own inspiration. So, as you can see, I'm planning this as a multiple launch ship. I didn't just decide I wanted only the central core. No, we are going to be doing this in multiple launches, only 2 launches. And I'll show you how we're going to do it. So this is a big module here. So I'm using the 5 meter fairing, in fact, for both of the launches because they're very wide payloads. And to kind of make it, you know, the actual difference in thickness between the payload fairing and the body of the rocket, I'll try and minimize that difference. It doesn't look too dumb. So that's why I'm using the 5 meter pieces. That was the rocket construction there. This is, in case you didn't figure it out, by no means a tutorial on how to do anything in Kerbal Space Program. Because if this is kind of all new to you and you want to do this, don't. Do simple things first and then build your way up to things like this. Because whilst it's not necessarily more difficult in terms of the actual core principles of what it is I'm doing, the ships themselves are much more cumbersome, clunky, slower to respond. The actual performance of the game is much slower, so it's harder to do things kind of as you play. So this is kind of a more, I don't want to say it's for advanced players, implying that I'm this super godlike player that is impossible to achieve. It's basically just if you want a tutorial, this is not the video for you. That's why I'm not going to go too in-depth into any of the specific things I'm doing. But you can kind of see how I'm building up this structure here. Very unrealistic in terms of building a realistic rocket, but I wanted to cut down on the number of launches we did. So we're only doing 2 launches. This is how I'm doing it. I'm kind of assembling all of these pieces very carefully in this sort of stack and then abusing the offset tool to, you know, offset them so there's no clipping, and then we can just gradually detach them all once they get close to the central core, which will be the first thing we'll launch. And I've got those guidance modules there with lots of monopropellant tanks and SAS units, batteries, all that, to actually steer these components into place. And then once it comes to landing, we can just attach those pieces so there's no like RCS thrusters or weird things left bolted to the side of the base. That's one of the things I always liked doing, but I still do in fact, as is evidenced by this video, is I don't like building static bases with just monopropellant thrusters there. It looks a bit weird because why would a static base have them? So there we go. We're going to be getting rid of those. And there will be some landing engines as well. You may have noticed those aero spikes on the central core. So not this rocket, the one we just built. There are some aero spikes on the central core, which again will be detached and destroyed along with all the parachute modules as well. So we'll get a nice, clean base on the surface of Duna. At least that's the intention. Will we pull it off? Yes, we will. Otherwise, I wouldn't have uploaded it. But here we are building the rocket. Again, both these rockets are very similar. This one is not as simpler, though. This one is nowhere near as simple. It's a lot more thick with 2 C's there. It's more of a chonk rocket. It's much, much wider. Again, the payload was a lot more cumbersome, a lot more bigger. So that was language. You know, this is the only elegant way I could have done it. Maybe I could have spent a bit more time, possibly even modularizing the bridges that connect the towers to the central core, because that's one of the reasons why the payload fairing is so wide on this thing, is because the actual bridges that connect the 4 towers to the center are very long. Maybe I could have added more docking ports to cut down on the amount, like split those bridges up into separate pieces. Or even use like the inflatable docking ports possibly to make a bridge. But I just wanted this. It's a lot more substantial. It's a lot more structurally sound, and it just makes things a little bit less complicated to have as few moving parts as possible. Some of you may be wondering, Matt, why don't you just use the robotic parts from Breaking Ground? And the reason I want to do this is because the actual hinge pieces, when the hinge, we can have them extended so the whole ship is folded up nice and compact. Then we can press an action group and the whole thing automatically unfolds into a nice structure. But the thing is, where those hinges they're not flush. There will be a small gap, which functionally won't make a difference because Kerbals can transfer through literally anything, like tiny batteries, massive fuel tanks. It wouldn't make a difference. But I would, the inner perfectionist in me would know about that, and it's just not good enough. I wanted it to be actually like a Kerbal could realistically transfer to any module in this craft. Like nothing, they wouldn't transfer through fuel tanks or anything, just docking ports and crew storage pieces. So that's why I didn't use robotic parts to make this unfold. Maybe I'll come up with a method of doing it with robotic parts. Like maybe have it so they're on pistons and hinges, and the piston kind of sort of lowers it onto a docking port, and the pistons and that are not at the angle that the bridge meets the central core. Does any of this make sense? I don't know if it does. Yeah. Maybe I'll do that in a future video, but not in this one. This is the solution I've gone with. So here we have the central core approaching its final orbit, which I'm setting as about 85 kilometers. I wanted to give us lots and lots of ample room because we only have a single solitary Wolfhound engine to lug not only what you can see on screen, but also the 4 towers all the way to Duna. It's not going to have great thrust to weight ratio, and that's using the Wolfhound as well. There's a reason I'm not using nuclear engines, which are the best engine for interplanetary missions if you want efficiency. I went for slightly less efficient engine just to kind of reduce the amount of time our burns will take. It's just so we can do the mission in fewer burns, that sort of thing, so the video doesn't go on for too long. However, long burns or not, well, the longer a burn takes, especially when you're burning at a planet's periapsis, especially a planet with an atmosphere like Kerbal, it is going to lower your periapsis during the burn. So if you start burning with a periapsis of like 70 kilometers and it's a 7-minute burn, you're going to end up dipping your periapsis way too low. You're going to start re-entering Kerbal. It's going to be a disaster. So that's kind of why I went with an 85 kilometer apoapsis height. Anyway, here we are well underway with our second launch. You may have noticed we deorbited at the Rhino stage of the last rocket just because I want to try and make sure that we don't leave any debris stuck in orbit. No sir, we're not going to be having any Kessler syndrome in this space program, and that's what I try and do in most of my KSP videos, is try and avoid leaving any debris stuck in space. So just in case any of you are getting a bit worried about all of those parasitic monopropellant clusters on the modules that we're launching here, don't worry. When we actually detach them from the station, it will be whilst we're re-entering, I guess just entering at Duna, so that they smash and explode into a billion pieces harmlessly on the surface of the red planet. And there we are, blasting through the upper parts of the atmosphere. I'm pretty sure that plasma is about to die down as we burn off the last of the fuel in our main, I guess it's the main ascension stage, isn't it? The stage after this is pretty much just the circularization stage. And we can see our target position is quite a bit behind us. So if we raise our apoapsis to the point where our orbit is going to be higher, and therefore slower, it'll give us the target some time to catch up with us. And there is a beautiful cluster. It looks like a glitched ship, doesn't it? Like, it doesn't look, no mere man designed this ship. It looks like it was designed by a drunk monkey, smashing things on a keyboard and somehow building a thing in Kerbal Space Program. That's kind of what it looks like from a distance. I guess when you zoom in, you can kind of appreciate the goal, the objective. Anyway, we're just doing some maneuver node making. You can see it's quite a big burn, almost 1,000 meters per second of delta V. So I've said this before. I don't try and get it too accurate, like the separation nodes, because the maneuver node maker predictor thing is not that accurate. Like when you finish the burn, you're not going to be ending up exactly what the maneuver node predicted. So I just try and get it roughly close, and then we'll do the fine tuning once we've got the bulk of our orbit all sorted. But here we are, well on the way to establishing our orbit, and then we can go for a slightly better encounter with the target and, get to the target. And then we will do by far the most tedious and complicated and, soul-destroying part of this mission. That is just docking everything to the station. But it's not as simple as docking just like a regular space station together, because we have to make sure the angles of the towers as they are attached to the central core aren't offset at an angle. Like, we don't want them twisted, because when it settles on the Martian surface, all of the towers will be tilted and the landing legs won't be flat. So that's kind of another challenge of building bases like this, as opposed to something like with a robotic station that could automatically unfold at exactly the right angle. There is some fine-tuning. It is a bit more difficult to do it this way. But like I say, the inner perfectionist within me appreciates it a bit more. Now, here we are approaching the target pretty close. However, we are going to drift away from it again, because I decided to do all of this on the light side of the planet just so you can see it a little bit easier, and just for it's better aesthetics for the video if it's done in the daytime. So we'll do another quick puff back towards the target, and then we can get ready to start docking this thing together. Now, all of these pieces are attached via their docking port, so we can just undock each component without any need to worry about, leaving separatrons and all that. Separatrons? No, those are solid rocket boosters, aren't they? Decouplers and separators stuck in orbit. Oop. Carefully just gently smashing against the other parts of the base, which is going to basically steer this thing towards the towards the tower. So at the moment I'm controlling through the observatory, but all of the other docks, I don't know why I did control from the observatory, because most of the docks I'll be controlling from the perspective of the docking port that we're going to be docking to the central core. Now I've balanced all of these towers out so that the center of gravity is roughly the center of the surface base. Again, to keep it more stable on the surface of Duna, but also during transit towards Duna, the Wolfhound engine is thrusting roughly along the center of mass on the craft. For example, if we had a massive fuel tank on one of those towers, when we start burning with that Wolfhound engine, the thing will just start spinning on the spot because it's not firing along the center of thrust. Now, we do have some big SAS units on this craft, as well as, the Wolfhound engine does have fairly good thrust, and it has some thrust vectoring as well, so it can cope with a little bit of offset mass, but you can't take it too far. So 2 of these towers are much heavier than the others, and we need to make sure those 2 towers are opposite each other. I believe this is one of the heavy ones here. The other heavy one is the one with the 2 drills on it. This being the heavy boy, we don't want to place it opposite the tower we just placed, because then it's not going to get to that center of balance just right. Now, you may have noticed, actually, when I said that you got to make sure the towers, when they're attached, aren't tilted. You may notice that they are actually a little bit tilted as I'm doing this. Right now, I'm just docking them to the station, and then once they're all docked together, we can start undocking again, doing some fine sort of tilting, twisting, then redocking. I just wanted to get everything smashed together first, and then so we're just done, so we're ready, and then we can start doing things a little bit more precisely once the main components are in place. You may notice I did a little crossfade here because I think once you kind of see me do it once, you can kind of get it. You kind of understand the general process of doing it again and again and again and again. Now, I'm just thinking, looking at the screen, you may notice there are some SAS units and a probe core on that Rhino stage, because the intention was I could deorbit that as well, much like the previous one. I don't think I actually did, though. I don't have any recollection of me editing this footage to include that. I think I just forgot. So there we are, guys. Stay tuned for next episode. Make sure you smash that like button and ring that bell and like the video for more episodes so you can see me deorbit that engine next video. I know, I really know how to keep a series in suspense tonight. I did, again, just quickly crossfaded away, but you saw me just undocking things, twisting them into position, then redocking them so they were nice and vertical. I feel the need to show it because it did take a while to get everything just very, tuned to perfection. So I just showed you a couple of examples, and then you guys can, I think, hopefully you can get it. Okay, moving on. We have now plotted our Duna encounter, which is pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get Duna encounters from Kerbal, provided you're launching at a Duna transfer window, which, sing along with me, guys. If you draw a line from Kerbal to the sun to Duna, the angle that forms at the sun will be 45 degrees. If you launch about that angle, you'll get a beautiful Duna encounter right off the bat. And here we are, doing the burn. So it's just under 10 minutes, so fairly long burn, but because we're at an 85 kilometer periapsis, we're not going to dip into the atmosphere, so it's okay. How far? I didn't actually check when I was doing the burn. I think I just made a drink or something. Okay, so we only dipped by 5 kilometers, to be fair. So we could have probably had a slightly lower periapsis if we wanted to, but I wasn't sure how long the burn would take. I didn't do any calculations of TWR before I did this mission. I just said, it's probably going to be a big burn. Let's just put the periapsis at a nice high height. We do have a bit more delta V than we really need, because I'm not going to be doing any circularization around Duna. I'm basically just going to yeet this thing straight into the atmosphere and just let all the air resistance do the slowing down and get ourselves on a landing. Now, the downside to this, well, the upside is that we save a lot of fuel, and it is much easier, and it makes the video shorter, so you guys can go and live your lives sooner. But the downside is that we can't choose our landing site, really. Like, we can choose it a bit. Like, we can modify our periapsis slightly so that we end up landing somewhere else if we don't land somewhere very desirable. But ultimately, Duna's pretty repetitive in terms of its general landscape. There aren't really that many geographical features aside from I can't talk. Aside from some Easter eggs, which I won't say because some people don't like getting quote-unquote spoiled by knowing about certain Easter eggs, but there are a few Easter eggs on Duna that might be interesting landing sites, but for the most part, it is a pretty repetitive surface. And hey, if we are making this a series, maybe I can then make some excursion vehicles that can travel from the surface base to an Easter egg and then back again through various confounded contraptions that I'm sure we'll be able to delve into in future episodes. So for now, I'm just like, let's just land somewhere. I don't really care where, as long as it's along the equator, because we have a space station in orbit. And it'd be nice if the space station did pass over the base camp at least once. So we want to make sure we're landing somewhere along Duna's equator so that the orbiting space station will pass over us, just to make any kind of missions, well, not missions, but flights from the station to the surface base and back again. It's much easier. I've got to worry about inclination changes, or at least not extreme ones. The space station's orbit is not quite perfectly equatorial, just so that if we don't land perfectly on the equator, we will still have some wiggle room to land directly below the space station for at least some of its orbit. Now here we are deploying the drills, just so we can deploy the monopropellant clusters that I accidentally clipped inside of them. So this could potentially blow up the entire station. So let's just get these ones out of the way now. And as you can see, they blew up themselves a bit, but everything else on the station was fine. So we are on a collision course with Duna's atmosphere, so those will crash harmlessly into the surface, and we'll deploy the other ones once we've entered the atmosphere, just so we can watch some nice pretty fireworks. They don't actually explode on entry, but we can just watch them fly around, add some visual stimulation to the dramatic Duna atmospheric entry. A few of them were struggling. They didn't want to leave us, but they had to go. They just gotta go. They gotta live their lives, they must leave the mummy's nest. I don't really know what I'm talking about here. Here we are entering the atmosphere. Look at all those flames. You may notice there aren't any Kerbals on board this thing because it's very dangerous. There are no heat shields on this thing. I didn't want to put Kerbal lives in danger. I'm pretty sure no one has ever said that sentence before, but it's a new precedent that I want to set for this series. So we're going to be putting Kerbals in this kind of whole Duna colony, so the space station and the surface base, probably next episode when we bring the excursion vehicles with us. Not the excursion vehicles, the transport that will get Kerbals to and from the surface and back to the space station, and then ultimately some means of transport from the space station to Kerbin, in case one of them contracts, I don't know, space Ebola or something. We want to get them back to Kerbin quickly as possible. There's at the moment no space escape system, no escape pod system to kind of get Kerbals quickly off the surface and back to Kerbin, or quickly off the space station and back to Kerbin as well, or anywhere else. If we could just banish them to live on Moho, who cares? So that's something we need to add to the kind of system before we can fully kind of safely place Kerbals aboard this thing. And you can see those monopropellant clusters crashing into the background, and they've been completely destroyed, so that's good. No debris left on the surface of Duna, and now we can come to our soft touchdown onto the surface. And those parachutes are probably providing enough drag so we can safely touch down, and the impact can be absorbed by those landing legs. But just to make sure nothing does get destroyed, I've got those aero spikes as well. The aero spikes will also serve as a useful means of moving ourselves, because I wasn't quite happy with this location. We are on a slight slope. I wanted to be on a pretty much flat area. I didn't do a very good job. We did a barrel roll and then landed pretty much in the exact same place. Cool suicide burn though. But then I thought, what if we use time warp and just retract the landing legs? And guys, we have built a walking base. Look, it looks like a little cartoon with those little black legs, black feet. That wasn't racist. That was me describing the aerospikes. Please don't demonetize me. It's got his little feet tiptoeing along, and we settle on we let gravity guide us to a flat area, and this is a much better spot. I did then some little hopping using the aerospikes a lot less aggressively than I did before, and I'm pretty happy with this spot. We are pretty much on the flat. I guess we're doing some final little hops, but for the most part, we are here. As I was about to say, the other use of the aerospikes, aside from walking along, is that they can then be used to get rid of those parachute modules that we don't need, and leave us with a nice, clean aesthetic for the rest of the base. And I thought, let's just, clip through this rock, and then we've got a nice rock next to us. We've got a nice rockery. It's a rockery. It was that's going to be our garden. I don't know. And we had to do a quick jump up so we could deploy our landing legs and then land on them. It wasn't the smoothest. It wasn't as smooth as I intended, but I guess it worked, so it's fine. And then we can go ahead and detach all those pieces one by one, maximize those aerospikes, and just watch them. Well, isn't that lovely? There we go, and it's done. It is done. And actually, as is this mission, we can deploy everything, the scanners, the ladders, which are exactly the right length for the ground, which is always satisfying. We got our science modules there as well. We can open and close the doors with a toggle on the action groups, and then we can deploy the drills as well. There we go. Now, there isn't a craft file in the description, guys, unfortunately, because I always find that surface bases and space stations are much more satisfying when you can design it yourself. And because this was like a multiple launched thing, it's harder for me to just upload a single craft file. And I want to encourage people to, build things out of your own imagination. So, to conclude, to kind of summarize the series so far, we've just done the base. Here is our Duna space station, currently unoccupied. That's going to change very soon. And we've also got the deep space gateway around the Mun. So a mission to Mars would involve, going to the moon, going to the deep space gateway, and then we'll go to Mars. I guess I've been using real human space program terms. We'll go to the Mun, use the deep space gateway, then go to Duna, stop off at the space station, then drop down to the surface and go to the surface base. Guys, it's going to be epic. It's going to be great. Smash that like button, ring that bell, because we have to say this on YouTube to appease the algorithm. Praise be upon the almighty algorithm, and praise be upon the links on screen. That was dumb. On the left-hand side is a link to the full Destination Duna playlist that now is a thing. On the right-hand side is a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm. You can also find links to Patreon and to subscribe on screen, and in the description you'll find links to Twitter, Discord, merchandise, Instagram, all that good stuff. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.